to episode 57 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 18th of February 2019. I'm Joe, and with me is Phelim.
Hello.
Yes, so where the fuck are Will and Graham? They're in Malta, the bastards.
In an American bar, no less. They couldn't even be cultured while they're away.
Yeah, so they're just hanging out, having beers. No, they're there to work on some engineering sprint. I think most of Canonical is there. They did offer to take their mics, but we just thought, nah, we'll just let them have some fun. And we've actually got a really long interview coming up with Todd Weaver from Purism, which we'll play in a bit. But before that, we'll do a few news stories, just kind of light news section. So starting off with Plasma 5.15, which I've heard there's not anything hugely spectacular in it.
No, I think it's more a sort of tidying up of a lot of, paper cuts is the term that they're starting to use now, I can see, which is funny coming from the Ubuntu side of things. But there's a few nice little bits like the battery indicators for Bluetooth devices. So it'll show you the power level of the device that's connected via Bluetooth, which I think is pretty smart. Although I could swear I've seen that before on my headphones that lie to me about being half full and then immediately go beep and turn off.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things is there's the general steady onward progression of Wayland. They're porting more stuff to Qt Quick 2 in some of the settings, getting some more screen reader stuff done with the Alt tab is now working with screen readers, so continually improving the usability. And one thing that sounds pretty interesting, I've not had a chance to try it yet though, is the WireGuard in Network Manager. So that sounds pretty decent because that is a nice piece of kit. So I'm looking forward to trying that out properly. Oh, one last thing that's decent is the new Firefox Save Open Dialog is now a Qt dialog. And you might think that is not very exciting, but that is actually really nice because in KDE, you have obviously your shortcut locations that you can stick on the side of your Open Save dialog, and that can be anywhere else. It can be an FTP server somewhere else. It can be a different PC on Samba. It could be all sorts of different protocols like Fish, and that is now all available to you. Whereas before, if you had Firefox open, you wanted to save it off to a different server, rather than having to copy it locally and then transfer it off, you had to open a file browser window somewhere else and then drag the link from Firefox into it, so it would then do all the magic of linking all the things correctly. That's all now in the Firefox dialog, so you don't have to worry about it.
Surely you just copy link location and then CD to the relevant directory and wget it.
No, I would not do that because it might not even be a Linux box. So that's what you have to do if you want those sorts of things. It might be your Pi that is a headless sort of TV thing. So
yeah, fair enough. So it's actually more than I thought in this then.
Yeah, so if you follow Nate Graham's weekly log of all the things that they're doing, I mean, it's pretty large. Even though they seem sort of fairly small, you're seeing those well in advance. And then when it actually comes to release time, all of those that he's been talking about possibly weeks, maybe even months ago, are all bunched up together and you got a new release of them. And tomorrow is going to be the 4.15.1 release to fix any of the things that might not have gone well or improve some of them. So that's even coming out tomorrow. So there's even more work coming. So some great work with the KDE team.
4.15? You mean 5.15, surely?
I do mean 5.15. Oh, yeah. Oh, I wish it was 4.15.
We're not on RHEL.
Yeah. Party like it's 2003.
So also they've embraced snaps then, finally. It's a shame Will's not here to gloat about that.
Yeah, no, because, I predicted that Ubuntu would have a snap-based desktop. I mean, surely Kubuntu can creep in there with this. But no, there's five fairly decent apps that have come out. A couple of educational ones, KTurtle and Palapeli, I think you say it. It's a puzzle game. KTurtle is obviously a KDE version of the old BBC Turtle game that used to play. Created a very excellent image editor, and KRDC, which is about the only one that I've actually used on this thing besides Ocular, the last one for PDFs. But they've actually said at the bottom that they've still more work to do to get everything else back into Snap. But I think that's what they're aiming for. I think they're trying to snap as much of it as possible. So quite interesting.
I'm going to make you cry now. My wife uses Krita on XFCE.
Well, I mean, at least she recognises it's superior to the GIMP. So
she does, yeah. She doesn't like GIMP at all, but she likes Krita. So There you go. That's another thing for us to disagree on. I much prefer GIMP.
Every time I try to use Krita, or in fairness, any graphics app, I like say red eye correction or anything like that. Nah, it's a fucking disaster. Layers all start coming up, and I can't edit the picture, and I can't export it properly. I just admit to myself, I just have no graphical skill whatsoever.
Well, all I use GIMP for is open file, Shift C, crop, enter, export, done.
Gwenview, that's what you want there. All in one tool.
I don't know. I resize images and stuff sometimes as well, but no, GIMP's good enough for me. I'm used to it now. All right, well, that's enough KDE nonsense. Let's talk about Red Hat and yet more bad news for MongoDB.
Yeah, kind of funny.
Yeah, so their satellite system is going to not use Mongo anymore. It's just going to use Postgres. Now, this isn't like just because of Mongo shit in the bed with the licenses. This has been in the works for quite a number of years, but it seems they're accelerating it now because of the MongoDB situation.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, there is an embedded database still within it that will be Mongo, but they've said very explicitly that they're going to get that out of there as soon as they haven't got an exact plan for it yet, but it's going to happen. But yeah, talk about fortuitous that they were already working on a Postgres sort of shift. I mean, I think originally you used to have Oracle as a backend, if I remember rightly. And it was a kind of weird thing where you were still, you had an Oracle database and you're running satellite with it and stuff. So I guess Postgres is a really good DB, and you don't want to have multiples there. I mean, it's more developers of different skill set, probably more costly to maintain it. So yeah, if you can do it all in the one, just do it that way.
Are you using this in production anywhere then?
No, only a few Red Hat boxes I work with, and that they're kind of solitary sort on their own. So there's no real benefit of having it, to be honest.
No, right. Well, it's a bit of comeuppance, isn't it, for MongoDB trying to, change their license and make more money and everything. And now everyone's just saying, well, yeah, we're just not going to use you then.
Yeah, so. No, it's weird. It's shoot yourself in the foot time, all right?
Yeah. All right, so let's finish the news with a pretty interesting one, actually, that the Wine developers have released an alpha of something called Hangover, which enables you to run x86 64-bit applications on a 64-bit ARM OS and machine. And it's sort of using a combination of some aspects of Wine and QEMU. So that looks quite good for the future, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And you sort of have to wonder what the sort of base development platform is going to be, because with Proton you can develop and not have to worry about development for Linux almost. You're now going to be able to develop for ARM processors at the same time. And we're going to get it all the way down to just one SDK that you have to aim for, roughly hit, and they'll port it to everything else with a mixture of Wine and QEMU. Yeah,
it sounds like it's not great for performance yet, but some like really old games are going to work well. It obviously depends on how beefy your ARM processor is. So it's good news, though, and it's one to watch. I'd not heard of it until today, so I thought, yeah, just worth a quick mention.
And so will Hangover 2 feature the RISC-V then, yeah?
Hopefully. Oh, dear. Okay, this episode is sponsored by DigitalOcean. Go to do.co/LNL, that's for Late Night Linux, and you can get $100 credit, and you've got 60 days to use it. DigitalOcean offers VMs, or droplets as they call them, in data centers all over the world, super fast networking and super fast SSDs. And these are VMs with full root access, and you can pick one of the distros that they offer, like Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, or CentOS, or even FreeBSD, or you can use your own custom distro if you like. They've got loads of one-click apps, so it's really quick to set up WordPress or Discourse or GitLab or something like that. And I mentioned it last time in their plans for 2019, but now they've launched managed databases. So you can get Postgres databases that are completely managed and scalable with automatic failovers, really easy backups, and completely hassle-free. Check out blog.digitalocean.com for more information about that. And also check out their tutorials. There's over 2,000 of them on the website. All sorts of things, anything you can think of to do with Linux. It's a really valuable resource. Even if you're not using DigitalOcean, you've still got access to it. So many great features. I don't have time to tell you all about them now. Just go to do.co/LNL, get your $100 credit, check it out for yourself. That's do.co/LNL. Okay, so as promised then, an interview with Todd Weaver from Purism. Now, we spoke to him on the show a year ago. It was actually on Valentine's Day when we recorded it, and sure enough, managed to sort it out for Valentine's Day this year. It was only me talking to him because
we have lives.
It was pretty late at night. It ended up being at midnight, I think, when I spoke to him. No, 1 o'clock actually, my time. And he'd been driving around doing meetings all day, so it was just him. He said he pulled over to speak to me. But he put aside quite a lot of time for this, so I'm thankful for that. And I did grill him on quite a few things. So, let's hear that now. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was good of you to make time. I know you've been very busy, but we said we'd do this on Valentine's Day, and here we are a year later. It's been a long old year, hasn't it?
There's certainly been a lot happening, and it's actually kind of surprising that it's been a year since we chatted last.
Yeah. So how are things going generally with Purism?
Remarkably well. So just from an overall growth standpoint, we're seeing triple-digit growth year over year, so it's just fantastic. And then also, overall community support and the accomplishments we've made, it's really things are kind of hitting on all cylinders.
Excellent. And before we get into the phone stuff, let me ask you about the laptops. How is the original mission going? Because the original mission was to ship laptops that were completely FOSS running. They didn't require any binaries at all. So where are you with that?
Well, we've actually been what we would consider met our goal a number of years back on shipping core boot that has a neutralized management engine. However, there's and then we're also working with the Free Software Foundation to say, like, hey, this is the status of what the management engine does currently, which means in the neutered state, and it's disabled once it power on. So, because I think you're jumping straight to that. So on Intel and anything recent, meaning manufactured since 2008, that we have to go through these extra efforts to make sure that the device runs completely free software. And so what we've done is we've submitted and shared that with the Free Software Foundation, who's the sort of gatekeeper on those low-level aspects of things, to evaluate and confirm that this doesn't have anything malicious in its operation. And then, of course, there's some additional areas as you start to dig a little bit deeper than that even, which are things like the firmware support package, FSP, and then, of course, firmware that's actually in drives and peripherals, et cetera. So things are going really, really well. And the overall security story we have on the laptops is fantastic. We're going to actually be announcing very soon the Librem key default integration with this overall thing we call Pure Boot, which is really core boot plus heads plus TPM plus Librem key, which basically makes it a tamper-evident device. So if there's been any bit change in your operating system or potentially just your boot partition, then it's flagged that there has been tampering, and that hasn't been done before. So those things are, we're continuing to advance on the security story around the Librem laptops.
Excellent. Well, I think what most people are interested in is the Librem 5. So the question in my doc here is, how's your goal of shipping the Librem 5 in January going?
Yes, that's a great question. I love that they use the old ship date. That's sort of like that's a minor dig on our original estimation of January. So overall, things are going really remarkably well. The shipping of hardware is hard. So we ran into one issue with the CPU, which ended up moving from January into sometime we're talking about Q2. We're planning to ship some of the things initially here in April. We're going to be coming out with an additional announcement, which is you're just ahead of me being able to make that announcement on this call, on what that actually looks like with regards to the video, showing what the status of the operating system is, what's the status of fabrication, what's the status of shipments. What's been fascinating has been the after development kit shipment, which is development kits running all the same hardware we're going to have in the finalized phone, sort of in a breakout board fashion. And then we've been able to test, fulfill the shipment of that hardware, and then continue development around that. The thing that's been really remarkable has been because you've touched on how many people are interested in the Librem 5 phone, and it's highlighted in every one of our accomplishments. Because when we say, hey, we've shipped the Librem 5 development kit, just a flood of orders have come in because everybody realizes, hey, that phone's actually going to come to fruition, right? It's going to make it to market, and was actually really a big surprise.
But those dev kits that you shipped in December weren't exactly working 100%, were they? I'm thinking specifically the screen and the HDMI out didn't work. My understanding is the HDMI out is working now, but the screens are still not for people who you've shipped them to.
Yeah, so in the case of every time when we're talking about a hardware development kit, the entire point is once the hardware's done, and we can ship that to developers who can then, of course, advance the overall development. So we met all of that standard. And yes, HDMI out works, and the screens work for what's called OTP, or one-time programmed screens. And so we have been one-time programming screens for certain development kits, and then we're going to either do a software update for the ones that are still needing it, or possibly get to the point of assisting with one-time programming of those screens. Besides that, the overall development is continuing to advance, right? So somebody can, on a one-time programmed development kit, end up booting, seeing the FOSH screen, the lock screen, right? Unlock the device, see a bunch of handful of applications, such as a calls application, the messaging application, web browser, that at least render to the screen. And there's an awful lot more we have to do around the FOSH speed, the overall applications, the default applications we're looking to have in adaptive form. But where we are on the software side is a really great position to be in, sitting here at the early part of February.
So that one-time programming, did you say? What was the one-time thing with the screens? What exactly is involved with that? I saw at FOSDEM a black box was involved.
Yes, that's hilarious. It happens to be a black box. But yeah, so there's a one-time, there's an init sequence that has to be sent to the screen to actually activate the screen. And it can be stored on the screen, or it can be sent from the bootloader at the time of power up. And getting that sequence just right from the panel fabrication, or panel maker, has proven to be difficult because of NXP's size of the amount that we can send in the init sequence. So we're sort of battling with NXP to say what's the size that we can end up sending, and how can we send this magic sequence? Otherwise, we can end up having it stored on the panel itself. And that's basically the summary of the panel initialization code.
And presumably the code that needs to go to the panel is non-free software.
Well, no, it's just an initial configuration. So it's a very small amount of code. We have the code, right? So it's not an aspect of free or not free. It's an aspect of NXP's size of being able to deliver that to the panel is too short of a buffer to be able to deliver the entire code sequence. We have to deliver it through this one-time programming aspect to then have it stored on the panel itself, and then we can, somebody can use that from then on.
So how come that wasn't done before you shipped these dev kits out to everyone?
Well, the problem is, in some cases, when you're planning on hardware and saying, yes, we can end up getting this initialization code sent out, then in our testing and everything else we were doing, we assumed we would be able to get that out in a software update. And then as we started testing more and more, we realized that that's actually going to have to be a one-time programming issue. So that was really just around our knowing what we needed to do, and then running into this bug on the silicon of NXP that makes it where we have to have this workaround.
And so the people who have bought these dev kits who weren't able to go to FOSDEM and meet up with you, or aren't able to meet up with you or someone from your company, will they ever be able to use their screen? Or
So the two paths forward are really simple. One is a software update to initialize a screen, which we're still working on to try to work with NXP to say, hey, let's figure out what that initialization sequence is. But we don't want to have that continue to linger on. And so the alternative is to ship a one-time programmed panels to any backers who have one that's not working.
Okay, right.
The goal, of course, is with the dev kit is to make sure that everybody can advance the development of the system, right? So these are not profit centers for us, right? We clearly are losing money on the development kits. But the goal is to make sure that everybody and all developers can advance the overall platform. So we'll make sure that that gets in the hands of all the developers, one way or the other.
Okay. The dev kit is enormous relative to a phone size. So how are you going to slim down that into the chassis of a phone?
Well, when you say enormous, I am actually kind of surprised that you would use that word because it's actually not that much bigger than a phone space. So, but there's two important pieces to say. A development kit, what we actually used is a system on module that is basically all the complex components of a phone are in the system on module, which fits easily inside the footprint of a phone. And then what we did is we created the breakout board of the system on module, and that breakout board has things like an Ethernet port and a camera, separate, and then the separate modules for cellular modem, Wi-Fi card, etc. So it was really designed to be a breakout board that's just a little bit bigger than a phone. That's in a parallel track to all of the efforts we've been putting into the phone design. So the whole point of a dev kit is to say, we need to use a system on module, create a breakout board so we can get it out early, while we're doing in parallel all of the schematics and hardware design to fabricate a phone that's in a smaller size. But it's also clear from the component placement that it can all fit within the size of a phone. But it's also an important point to make, which is that the phone itself is going to be about 14 millimeters thick or so, which is the thicker size of a phone, similar to kind of like iPhone 4 original thickness, because we're going to be using the full footprint for all the components because we actually separate the CPU from the baseband, from the Wi-Fi card, and et cetera.
So looking at the dev kit, I've only seen photographs, mind you, but looking at it, there's quite a large heatsink there. So that is presumably necessary to keep it cool. So what are you going to do about that? Because you obviously not, if you've only got 15 millimeters, you're not going to be able to fit a huge heatsink in there. What are you going to do about thermals in this phone?
Yeah, so it's a common question when someone doesn't understand hardware manufacturing and actually the process. So of course we have a heatsink on a early version that has an errata against the actual silicon. So we need to specifically cool that. But the other piece is that wasn't actually ever optimized in the kernel for power management. And so there's been an awful lot of advancements on power management. So as an example, when we first brought in the system on module from Mcraft, that's NXP's partner, that the temperatures were 80, 90 degrees Celsius, which is extremely hot. And in our latest kernel version that we've worked with to end up getting included on the dev kit, we've dropped that to 34. So there's an awful lot more that we can end up doing just in software tweaks. So that way it's not just maxed out on its power consumption and also heat. So there's an awful lot more that we can end up doing around software as well. So of course there's not going to be a giant heatsink on the phone, but that's another example of putting out early hardware so that developers can actually start advancing the cause and then continuing to tweak software so that way it can use proper power management.
Okay, well, that does make sense that it needs more software development is the answer then, essentially. You're not quite there yet.
That's right. But even where we are now with going from 90 degrees Celsius, which is burn a hole in your pocket hot, to 34, which is just warm, that's a huge advancement in such a short period of time. And there's still more work to do. We know there's all sorts of additional optimizations that we will be making around, a phone that goes into idle state.
Yeah, because a big red flag for me was seeing a post on the Post-Market OS blog where they'd got that running on one of the dev kits and they'd kind of jerry-rigged a fan over the heatsink.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's right. That was very, very early days. That would have been like a 90-degree Celsius version, and they probably have updated to the latest kernel now, and it's running at 34, and they don't need to put an ice pack under it or a fan running on it. Yeah, that's right.
Right, okay. So the board that you are using, the system on a chip, is the IMX8, right? Now, I read the website, the spec of it, and I get the feeling that it's not designed to be in a phone. If you look at something like a Snapdragon, then that is clearly designed to be in a phone, whereas the target hardware for the system on a chip that you're using is more kind of set-top boxes, things that are running off mains. And because the power draw, even when idle, is quite high, isn't it, compared with other ARM chips?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And this is a difficulty of driving for complete freedoms versus caving and saying, oh, why don't we just use Snapdragon, or why don't we just use Android, would might as well be the next argument. So what we have to do is we have to use hardware that gets us all of our freedoms, where there isn't any mystery code and there's no binaries running on it, and you have complete control of the device. There's no mobile chips that are used in phones today that get us there. So what we do is we look to what is a method that hardware-wise we can actually still put in a phone, and those are the IMX8. And we could, of course, gone with IMX6, but that's really ancient, right? That's 10 plus years old. And so we wanted to go with IMX8. And the roadmap for IMX8 is actually really, really good. So IMX8M that we're using now has a die for this year. And then next year, it's actually dropping to a 14 nanometer. So it's going to end up dropping in its power consumption in the future. So we are on a long trajectory of a platform that's going to get improve, right, year over year. So being able to manage the heat and power draw on existing silicon that we can end up delivering, and then knowing that version 2 is going to just get smaller and faster and more powerful and less power draw, and then the next revision after that is going to continue. So we wanted to make sure we're on a good roadmap as well. And then the other aspect of IMX8M Mini versus IMX8M Quad, a lot of that's around what's the GPU status, where are things going with the actual direction of hardware, and those are all factored into the overall roadmap of what we have, making sure that we can have a phone that respects people, as opposed to giving up or caving on some aspect of it and not being fully satisfied.
And so presumably it's going to have a reasonably big battery. Do you have a target for idle battery life in terms of hours?
Yeah, so our overall goal would be, if we can get to the point when you can use your phone for average usage throughout the day and charge it when you're sleeping, then we would be happy. And I think that we're going to, from all the testing and benchmarks and everything else, we are confident we're going to be able to get to that stage. And then anything on top of that will be bonus.
And so you're aiming to do that by the time you actually ship the phone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're very close right now, yes.
And so the question that everybody wants to know is, when are you going to ship this phone?
Yes, I know. You happen to ask me, like, how many days here early?
Well, bear in mind, this isn't going out until Monday, looking at the calendar, the 18th.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's good to know. So we will be shipping it. Is it going to be Q2 or Q3? That'll be a question. However, it's everything is marching forward. The big area that we ended up hitting is all around the silicon bug and seeing what we needed to do in software, and could we fix it in software, or do we have to fix it in hardware? And that ended up creating this delay in fabrication. But the actual development of the software stack, the entire application suite and everything else is progressing on extremely nicely.
And what about this store then, the App Store? How is that going?
That's actually going remarkably well, because what we're actually looking to do there is just simply establish an easy way for people to recognize and have a badging system to say, what applications are there available? What applications can I run on my phone, and does it respect me as an individual? And so the PureOS store is it's pretty simple. We already have had a repository for PureOS for a while. What we've done is added the ability for Flatpak, and then this badging system, so that way when application developers want to write something specific for the Librem 5, they can write an application for Librem 5 and then also get it included in FlatHub and a bunch of other places.
And how many apps are going to be kind of phone optimized at launch, do you think?
Well, that's a great question. So we only promised 5 in the campaign, and that's our main focus, right? To make sure all of those work, so that when you can make a phone call and do all the other things that you would normally do with a phone, such as browser, email, messaging. And but we've already seen because of our efforts to get libhandy, which we wrote, into GTK, which is now in GTK proper, then new development and anybody who's writing or adapting code is actually just changing classes. So they can take any existing application and use the same windowing process and change a few classes to make it adaptive. So the number of applications we're going to see by the time we're shipping the phone is going to be, it's going to ever grow beyond the 5 that we promised. And we already have seen a music player. There's going to be the settings application that's going to be added, obviously contacts. There's going to be some additional ones that are going to be announced here soon. And even some game developers have started developing games for the Librem 5. So the number of applications is going to be kind of an ever-growing number, and which is also a great response to when someone says, well, how are you going to compete with Android's, giant number of applications? It's really just momentum and time. Because we've created the ecosystem that so many people want to support and be part of, that we know now it's just a matter of time before we start to see a giant number of applications being written in an adaptive manner.
And how many of those applications are in-house developed and how many are developed by the community?
Oh, well, obviously we're focusing on the initial 5 internally. And then we've worked with some, let's say like Fractal, which is sort of a matrix discussions application. And that is one in which we've sponsored. So we've actually funded development to make sure that happens. So right now, I'd say of the core applications, it's probably 80% Purism, 20% community involvement. And then there's some other applications that are that will be 100% community based off of our libhandy and Fosh, commitments to upstream. But we expect that our focus is going to be continuing to do core applications that are needed to operate on a phone, and then the secondary applications will a lot of times come from the community. And then as we continue to grow, we'll start pouring on more and more, make sure that we have a complete package for average people, right, to get a phone that respects them.
Okay, so that sounds like there will be at least some basic functionality there. Speaking of community then, how are the other community ROMs going, to your knowledge? I'm thinking UbiPorts, Plasma Mobile. I saw a recent Plasma Mobile sprint. There's a photo of Plasma Mobile running on the dev kit. When we last talked a year ago, there was mention of possibly Replicant, possibly Lineage OS. Has there been any kind of updates with the community ports?
So overall, I'm actually kind of surprised by how much movement has gone on from these other community ports. So there's some of them that are in the early stages of meaning they got early development kits and have already advanced things. That's like what you're referring to as Plasma Mobile. And then there's other ones like UbiPorts that are getting the dev kits. I think this might be this month. And so it's sort of depending on the stage as to which the partnership was. We obviously shipped everything to early backers first, and then have been slowly working through each of the partnerships to make sure that they have hardware to work on. But I think that a good rule of thumb to answer your question there is, if somebody is doing something in the GNU space, Linux kernel backed, let's say mainline, then they're advancing things pretty quickly. If it's more toward looking at what somebody trying to get some Android derivative on the phone, we haven't heard an awful lot of that progress. There's just been more talk about it happening than seeing the active community spinning those things up.
Because Android is kind of the lifeboat here, isn't it? If people aren't happy with the experience that they have, because let's face it, PureOS is not particularly mature compared with something like Android. And that was one of the advantages of the Ubuntu phones that were shipped. You always had that option of just flashing Android on it, just flashing Lineage, and having a relatively free software experience. Obviously, those phones had the blobs or whatever, but I would be more inclined to buy this phone if I knew that there was a chance that I could just flash Lineage on it if I didn't like the Pure OS experience.
That's a fair point, but it certainly has nothing to do with what it is that we're advancing.
Yeah.
I literally don't have any like, oh, great, we can have this backup plan of flashing an Android derivative. I have no interest in that. So as far as like a company goal, it's fine if somebody wants to, and it's great that and we'll support the community around that. And so you, as somebody who might be interested in the phone, might like that overall story, but we don't have that as like a reasonable backup, which is why we're investing so heavily in advancing an actual fully freed operating system.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I don't expect you to really care that much about Android. It's just me as an end user, it just would help sell it to me.
Yeah, right, which makes sense. And that's, I feel like, why the groups that are Android derivatives are really excited, because they can see that, oh, wow, look, we can have a hardware that can actually run mainline, but can also still run the Android ecosystem on top, or de-Googled Android system on top, which is fine by us. And obviously, it's great to be able to make sure that hardware can run that. The mission for us is to solve the long-term problem, right? We completely understand that this is a marathon, and what we're doing is growing through making all the advancement we need to have a phone that respects people, and that's our whole mission, and everybody on board is rowing towards that destination.
Yeah. Okay, well, I put the call out on Twitter for questions for you, and quite a lot came in. It helped that Purism retweeted it, so thank you for that. I've got a few, kind of a limited selection of those, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
The first one was, with regards to the App Store, have you considered an elementary OS style pay what you want scheme?
Yes, absolutely. We've actually even talked to the elementary OS folks at Guadix last year about what they saw that worked and what things that they'd like to see in the future. And so yes, the entire point is to have where we have these applications that are just curated to say that they work on the phone, and we have this badging system. But part of that is we can have a donation process, a pay the developer process, a subscription process, or just straight up gratis application, and that is going to be part of Pure OS Store.
Excellent. So another question, how many full-time developers do you have working on Pure OS Mobile, specifically, not the desktop version?
Oh, that's probably going to be right around, I'm going to say close to 20.
Okay, well, that's quite a lot then. Another question, will Signal be supported on the Librem 5?
There is a couple of community folks that are working on the APIs to have Signal work, yes. And we have connections with Signal where that's one that is, of all the applications out there, is the most likely one that would be able to be included by default and meet the criteria that we have.
Okay. Quite a few people asked about other models and other stuff that you're going to do. So, I mean, the Librem 5 is it fair to say it's mid-range? It's not particularly low-end, it's not particularly high-end. And so are you likely to do a lower-end version at some point, or a higher-end, like real flagship version?
Are you referring to mobile specifically, or other products?
Well, mobile specifically. I mean, people did also ask about routers and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the mobile space, it's going to be, because we are so limited on hardware choices of main CPU and GPU, that it's going to be IMX8 going forward. And then what we're going to see is in the next silicon version from NXP, which I think is coming out in like January of 2020. Then we'll see the second revision of our phone on that same platform. So the future of the phone is going to be pretty much tied to what hardware freedoms we have. So as far as low end, or something that's going to be using Qualcomm or MediaTek, those two routes are probably not on the short-term roadmap, or even anything in 2020. As far as other devices, we have an awful lot of things that we're have in the roadmap, but we need to make sure we deliver on the business plan that we have in place. So those are things we're going to be announcing here in March. Services. It's going to be a bundle of services that come out. And so then we have hardware, software, applications, and also services. Then the next piece that's going to come out is a version 5 of our laptops. And then once we kind of have all those pieces solidified, shipping the phone, then we're going to evaluate, mini PCs to routers to servers, etc.
All right. Quite a lot happening then. You mentioned services. I saw somewhere ethical subscription services mentioned. Can you tell us any more about that, or is that all too much in the works to say anything?
Yes, I can give you the teaser part of that. Yeah, so we're going to be launching a service, which is actually a bundle of services. And what's kind of cool about this is that we understand the difference between decentralized protocols as powerful for users' rights while respecting the fact that everybody wants a really convenient bundle. So what we're going to offer is bundled up all of these decentralized protocols under one simple account. And there will be free levels of the account, but then it'll be things such as VPN, email, chat, video calling, voice calling, social media, all bundled under one. And then we're going to continue to just sort of pile on what's in that package, such as in the future having a virtual phone number and cloud storage and a bunch of other things. So you can see that what we're driving for is convenience. So you can end up having a phone or a laptop that you sign up with a single account. And then when you get the device, you type in your username, passphrase, and all of those services just simply light up. So for us to be able to provide a convenient product offering to an average citizen and have a device that actually respects them. And you can imagine the ease of that from a phone specifically is really very powerful. So the whole point is to bring this full circle of saying we have hardware, software, applications, and services all bundled under one thing, which is really, really convenient, but also completely respects the individual.
That sounds very ambitious with the services. Is the plan to launch that with the shipping of the phone, or is that a future endeavor?
No, it'll actually be earlier. We've been working on it for a number of years already, building up all of the we used to call it Purist services internally, and we have a sort of a channel around that as we've been building up. These are all the services that we use internally. And what we've done by making sure that we have a centralized LDAP authentication across all those services, and then we're basically scaling that up for a much larger amount of users. And so then we're going to be launching that. It could come as early as March when we're going to be announcing that, and then that will be ahead of the phone shipping.
All right. So would that be available to anyone running Pure OS on their own hardware, or is that going to be just Purism laptops?
It actually is going to be cross-platform. So it will even run on iOS or Android or any desktop environment as well. And that's a big piece of why it's taken us a while to invest in that, is to make sure that all of those things can play nice together. And so that way, because in the aspect of services, we need somebody to purchase a Librem 5 to run these services, right? We're not trying to make sure that everybody has to have a Librem 5 to have a encrypted communication. So it's a cross-platform offering based off of these decentralized protocols that have been well established in the free software world.
Okay, so will I be able to run my own instances of these that have got nothing to do with Purism?
Yes.
Excellent.
Absolutely. And that's a big piece of the freedom. So because we're a social purpose company and not a regular C corporation, that we are advancing social good before maximizing profit. And so that's a prime example of this, is that all of these things can be downloaded, hosted, all on your own in your own domain, and yet you'll still be able to communicate to everybody. It's obviously all the same sort of structure as to what email was originally, right? You can, of course, host your own, and I can still communicate to you. And those same things can be done through ActivityPub, which is, of course, what Mastodon is built on, and then Matrix, XMPP, et cetera. So all of these services that we're going to be bundling together are decentralized standards that can be self-hosted under your own domain. And we provide that as, here's all the packages, here's the setup scripts, and this is how you can end up doing it. Because we know that a lot of people, right, let's say the majority, would want to just say, oh, I like the convenience, I'll sign up for a service from Purism because it's convenient, and I like those folks, right? But there will be another swath of folks who are like, hey, I'd like to download this and host it on my own domain, but still be able to participate with all of those. And then we think that would be just fantastic.
And presumably you're going to favor copyleft licenses like AGPL for those then?
Yes. In every case, we strive for a very strict, GPL 3 or later, unless the upstream that we're using has a different license, and we, of course, work those licenses. But it's all going to be free software licensed.
Excellent. So have you considered MIPS or RISC-V? I know it's kind of early days it's very early days for MIPS. They've only just really announced that they're going to open that up. But RISC-V is kind of the hope for the future. Is that something you've considered?
Yes, absolutely. We have RISC-V machines testing, right? So and we're following it very, very closely. So once there is the ability for, let's say, a display to run on RISC-V, things like that, then we're going to continue to push that and follow along very closely. So I suspect that within a couple of years that we will have a RISC-V line.
All right. What, a phone running RISC-V, or what kind of device are we talking?
I would love that. I'd love that. However, a lot of it is going to depend on the hardware future of RISC-V. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to follow it very closely, and we may start with like a RISC-V router, right? Something that's headless and easy to do from the current state of where RISC-V is at. But as things progress, then we can end up moving toward, hey, maybe a RISC-V laptop, and then maybe a RISC-V phone, or and so we're going to continue to sort of just parallel the hardware advancements with RISC-V.
Cost is presumably quite an issue there because they're very expensive, the dev boards that you can get running RISC-V processors. So that must be something you're also keeping an eye on then when the price drops low enough to actually make it viable.
Yeah, price is less of a concern for us than a lot of other things. So what we would end up doing is pricing it according to our cost structure. And so if the market deems that, hey, that's really valuable, then we would be able to bring that product to market and people would buy it. A lot of times, and obviously from our history, we've shown that one of the risks that we remove is by putting out a crowdfunding campaign to say, hey, we'd like to put out a phone. Is there enough people who are interested in it? Because that's going to remove the risk of having for me to go get, let's say, traditional VC investment. And that's, of course, just a whole toxic world anyway. So that's also an approach that we would consider around RISC-V if the price is a concern, right? So then you can imagine we can say, hey, we can come up with this. We have the technical ability to deliver on it, but the pricing is this. Are you interested? And if enough people are, then, hey, we can manufacture it. And then that puts the risk into the market as opposed to, into our financial risk.
So are you still managing to survive without any VC funding then? You could tell me to bugger off and stop being rude if you like.
Oh, no. That's an important part of our story. So we formed as a social purpose company because I want to avoid anything that has anything to possibly taint our beliefs. And so, yeah, we have completely avoided VCs and we won't need them.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join me. I know you're very, very busy at the moment, and I suppose you've got a long drive ahead of you. So, yeah, hopefully you will ship it. And I don't know, maybe we'll have to catch up again this time next year.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I look forward to it.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by CDN77. Go to cdn77.com. And they are a UK-based CDN provider with a standalone live streaming platform providing end-to-end video solutions. They sponsor loads of great projects like CentOS, KDE, Fedora, Gentoo, and Funtoo. And one of their standout clients is the European Space Agency, who use CDN77 to deliver Hubble images all around the world. And this CDN is built from over 500 servers, all running Debian, and most of them are physical servers, only a few of them are VMs. And everything is developed in-house by CDN77. They make their own DDoS protection, and through the optimizations that they've done, they can push 80 gigabits per second of live streaming through just one machine. They've got 30 points of presence in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia, with daily peaks regularly exceeding 4 terabits per second. They're really big on innovation as well. They were the first CDN to implement features like HTTP2 and Brockley compression. But most importantly, it's really easy to use. I hosted an episode of the Joe Rest podcast on there, and it was really easy to put the file on there and link to it. And I've had no complaints about the speed from people downloading it all over the world. They've recently launched some new monthly plans with the best value on the market from $9.99 per terabytes as a global flat rate. And they've also got a pay-as-you-go option with no commitments and full transparency. They've got a 14-day trial with no credit card needed, so go to cdn77.com and sign up there. And once you've done your free trial and you're ready to go for the paid option, then mention Late Night Linux to the sales or tech support team, and you get an extra first payment bonus. So, for example, if you topped up $1,000, you'd get an extra $400 on top of that. So go to cdn77.com, sign up, and start delivering your content.
Yeah, you weren't letting him go about the dev kit.
Yeah, I did ask him quite a lot of questions about that, but the reason for that is when it comes to the phone, that's the only thing they've shipped to date. And I think it's pretty important to find out why certain things have happened. And, maybe I spent a bit too long talking about it, but it's the only thing they've shipped.
Yeah.
What else was I going to talk to him about? I mean, the laptops are fairly interesting, but that's a bit old hat at this point. Everyone wants to know, when are they going to ship this phone?
Yeah, I mean, he did talk about the laptops, and I do have to say I'm very jealous of the fact that you can get a fully hardware lockdown piece of kit where nobody can tamper with it. It sounds pretty damn good. It's a very tempting proposition, to be honest. I think you're right to hammer on the dev kit quite a bit. And were you happy enough with what he said about the type of hardware it is, how it fits on the board, and all the types of components, etc.?
I don't know, really. He's always got an answer for everything. He's very smooth, isn't he?
Well, that's why he's the CEO.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, really, if it satisfied me. I don't know, he was a little bit condescending. He basically called me thick at one point.
So he's also astute. Okay, that's good.
yeah, it's very on the money, yeah. So I don't know, really. Time is going to tell on this one. He talks a good game, and he's always talked a good game. And the dev kits were disappointing for people. There's no doubt with shipping them with the screens not working. But if he manages, the company manages to ship these phones and they're not terrible, I mean, that's all they have to be, is not terrible. They don't have to be amazing, do they? It's like the first rev, and as long as they keep updating the software on it and everything, then it'll be fine. It's just got to work. And, the 5 apps or whatever that he was talking about have to work reasonably well. And then people will be happy, but they just have to ship it. And, he was talking about sort of Q2, Q3-ish. So we're talking about summer. If that slips to the end of the year, and then if it actually slips to next year and WinPress is right, then that's going to be a really bad look for them. So I'm hoping that by the time I talk to him in another year, or we talk to him, that it'll have shipped, it'll be good, they'll be working on the second one, and there'll be loads of apps in the store for it, loads of flat packs. But I don't know, there's a slight risk that it'll be in the same situation and they won't have shipped it. And I'll be saying, what the fuck, Todd? When are you shipping it?
Yeah.
But you just have to give them the benefit of the doubt for now, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's fair enough. And I think also the decision where, he was saying it's not going to be the thinnest of all devices, but it's still going to be, a decent sort of thinness. And that's basically so all the devices can be physically cut and things like that. I think that's totally fine. And I think he seems to have a fairly realistic overview of, the App Store being the way it is and how they're working towards it. And he does seem to be sounding confident that it's Q2-3. I mean, he's not saying, oh yeah, it'll definitely be in the autumn. I mean, but maybe that's just his lead manager skills that I don't have.
Yeah, I think it might be. I don't know. Time will tell. All right. Well, normally we do the admin section in the middle, but it's a bit of a topsy-turvy episode, this one. So first of all, thank you everyone for supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. It is very much appreciated. And if you want to join those people, go to latenightlinux.com/support, and there's various options there. If you sign up on Patreon for $5 or more, then you can get an advert-free RSS feed, and then you don't have to listen to those anymore. If you want to get in contact, go to latenightlinux.com/contact. Before we get out of here, I just want to mention the Techmeme Ride Home podcast. Now, they got in touch and offered to do a mention swap. I think that some people don't actively talk about the nuts and bolts of it, but I just wanted to be honest about it. The Techmeme Ride Home podcast is a daily tech show that's about 15 to 20 minutes long, and it posts every single day. I think even at the weekend and stuff, it's crazy. And Techmeme is a fairly big site. Apparently Zuckerberg himself
Jesus.
definitely follows it or something. It's like the one news source that he follows. So that's pretty cool. I wonder if he listens to their podcast, then he'll hear about us.
Do you think he likes it?
Ha 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 ha.
Ha ha ha, thank you.
So anyway, yes, they're hopefully going to mention us. I don't know if they will after this fucking rambling nonsense. But yeah, they're in all of the usual places. So just search your podcast app for Ride Home. And subscribe to them, check it out. And hopefully loads of people who listen to theirs will be listening to us as well. So it's all a glorious, virtuous circle of I don't even know what. Anyway, right, with that then, we'll be back in a couple of weeks, hopefully with a full house and a normal episode. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelan.
See you later.